Well, thanks for taking the time to come to my talk today and for the workshop organizers for hosting me. I will be talking about how we're automating scientific insights at the Advanced Photon Source by developing high-performance workflows for analyzing experiment data. As an overview, the engineers at the Advanced Photon Source are creating automated data processing pipelines, leveraging high-performance computing to address our increasing data needs and enable scientific discovery. The Advanced Photon Source is one of several X-ray light sources. These are indispensable tools in the exploration of matter. And the reason why we want to use X-rays is because the wavelength of X-rays is similar to the size of different atoms and cells that we want to study. The Advanced Photon Source is one of a number of different scientific user facilities that are funded by the Department of Energy. And the users that come to these facilities come from a variety of backgrounds, whether that's from academia or government or industry. And they're interested in studying a variety of different things: materials, biology, geosciences, life sciences, security, and many other areas of research. So our objective when we design a workflow system is that we want to be able to enable our facility users to gain meaningful scientific insights. They want to get these insights as quickly as possible so they can pivot and continue with their experimental research. And the task that we need to do is to transform the raw data that comes from X-ray detectors into something that is meaningful. This would be done with a variety of different software, and it will depend on the type of experiment. Finally, we want to minimize the burden of this data processing on the user. This is motivated by the multiple order of magnitude increase in demand for computing resources that we have. So over the past decade, the Advanced Photon Source has created over 9,000 experiments in our data management database. And this is equivalent to about 4.9 petabytes of storage. You can see by this graph how our storage usage has increased over time. And finally, last year, we started archiving this data to tape. But over the next decade, we're expecting to generate hundreds of petabytes of raw data per year. And this will require tens of petaflops of on-demand computing power. So in the past year, we also went through an upgrade project. And you can see that this means that we're expecting to generate hundreds of petabytes coming up in the next few years. So the workflow solution that we develop has some requirements. We want to be able to process our experiment data automatically as the experiment is going on and the data is being collected. Also, the user might want to go back and see the results and then make some changes, reprocess based on what they're seeing. So the user should also be able to trigger the data processing. Furthermore, we want to be able to process data in a variety of places, whether that is on a local workstation that is sitting next to the experiment station, or at our APS computing cluster that we have on premises, or at one of our leadership computing facilities that we partner with. Finally, we want to be able to process experiment data with a variety of software packages. So the solution that we develop must be extensible and generic so that we can do processing with the software that is appropriate for the type of X-ray experiment being conducted. The first component to our solution for addressing these data challenges is our APS data management system. This is a facility-wide software and hardware system we have for managing data, and it provides tools to automate the transfer of data from place to place, managing access permissions so that users can only view data from their experiments alone, and also a metadata catalog with metadata associated with that experiment. But the main focus for this talk will be our workflow tools. This allows us to automate data processing with plugins. This means we can have either automated or user-initiated jobs, the flexible execution of any commands which could be run in a terminal, the ability to execute jobs either on a local resource or on a remote resource. And it's also integrated with the software that we use to actually control the physical aspects of the experiment, which is called Blue Sky. And it is integrated with Globus. The second component to this solution is that we've established strong partnerships with leadership computing facilities. So our collaboration with the Argonne Leadership Computing Facility and the National Energy Research Scientific Computing Facility means that the users that come to the Advanced Photon Source don't need to navigate HPC as well. The ALCF has provided us with an on-demand queue, which means that we have dedicated resources for computing, which is for on-demand experiment time processing. We also have service or collaboration accounts, which are dedicated specifically for APS beamlines. And this means that a APS user does not need to also go and get a separate account at a computing facility. We also have dedicated allocations, which means we have some hours set aside specifically for APS jobs. The next critical component of this solution is Globus Compute. This is a function as a service platform which provides remote job execution. So we can deploy different compute endpoints at these external facilities, which allow us to easily and securely submit jobs to the job queues at those facilities without actually requiring that a user have their own account and go and log into those resources. Another big success that we've had is integrating our control software with our analysis software. So Blue Sky is the software that the experiment users will use to actually control the experiment, whether that's, running different motors around or triggering the detector to collect data. And so that means that it already has a lot of very useful information about the conditions of the experiment and where data is going to be written on the file system. And this is very useful for downstream analysis. So we have added calls to our APS data management system into the Blue Sky plans, which run the experiment. And therefore, the users will automatically get their meaningful process data results when they execute their experiment without having to have any extra effort to run processing. So what does this look like overall? The whole data lifecycle starts with the users coming to fill out a form about what kind of experiment they are planning to conduct at the Advanced Photon Source. This information will then be put into a database about the experiment, and we'll use it to do some tasks such as setting up a directory for them in the storage and putting the file access permissions, and then the user will be ready to operate their experiment. So we'll start to monitor the local file system for new files coming in. And then Blue Sky will orchestrate the collection of the data for that experiment. And it will write some metadata that it knows. These files will then get transferred over to our central storage. And a workflow that has been pre-selected with some arguments will be triggered to run. This means that the data will be processed either locally or at one of our partnered leadership computing facilities. And in some cases, these results will then be published to a data portal. After time, the user has finished their experiment and maybe they've made some sort of publication, that data has finished its purpose and will then be archived to tape. So one of the main focuses of this solution is that we're able to standardize data processing for common X-ray techniques. So there are a number of different beamlines at the Advanced Photon Source, which operate mostly independently from each other. However, there is a lot of overlap in the type of X-ray science that they conduct. Therefore, it is very beneficial to us if we're able to take those commonalities in X-ray techniques and then use some common data processing libraries, which can then be wrapped up into workflows and be shared across all of these different beamlines. And this means a lot more ease of development and also knowledge sharing so that we can really make use of reusing the same tools. This also allows us to have a multi-tiered approach. So depending on the scale and the type of task that needs to be performed, it allows us to perform compute just at a local GPU workstation or at our APS computing cluster or at a HPC, very powerful machine. And all of this is abstracted from the user, and the user only needs to provide the name of the machine as one argument to the workflow, and this allows them a huge flexibility in where that task is actually performed. So now I'd like to draw your attention to one example of where this has been very successful. So one of the X-ray techniques that is used at the APS is tychography. And tychography data volumes are expected to increase by orders of magnitudes due to next generation upgrades to these research facilities. Furthermore, the type of data and processing for tychography really benefits from access to GPU computing resources. So Albert Wong and his colleagues were able to demonstrate taking data from the LINAC coherent light source and then using this workflow system to transfer that data over to the Argonne Leadership Computing Facility and then process it and get those results back using the Tychadis package to perform this analysis. And what this really demonstrates is that this solution is very portable and allows us to share workflows that have been developed at one light source with another light source so that we can reuse them even across facilities. And it provides access to large-scale computing resources to facilities that otherwise do not have them. Looking to the future, we'd like to expand to use portals and integrate our data management features into web pages. Additionally, there are many different types of X-ray data processing software and several other beamlines where this solution is not yet deployed. So we are going to continue to deploy this solution for many other packages and beamlines as time goes on. And finally, we'd like to develop streaming workflows using the PVA Pi streaming framework. I'd like to acknowledge the many people who were critical for implementing these solutions, including those at the ALCF, NERSC, our Data Science and Learning Division, and the Globus team. Also to the many different beamline scientists that informed this solution, and the many staff at the APS. In summary, the Advanced Photon Source is enabling scientific discovery and addressing its increasing data needs by creating automated data processing pipelines, leveraging high-performance computing. So what questions do you have?